The night explodes without warning. Metal tears apart in the dark, boots slam into thick mud, and a radio spits out half a command before dissolving into static. Artillery rumbles in the distance like an approaching storm, as panicked breaths cut through the smoke. Flares ignite the sky, flooding the ground with harsh white light. And somewhere near the perimeter, guards are shouting orders that collide in confusion. In the middle of the chaos, a lone figure moves low and fast, slipping through shadows as tracer rounds rip overhead. No one sees her cut the wire. No one hears her cross the line. And no one knows the girl disappearing into enemy. Territory is about to change everything until something impossible happens. Asterisk, it is the winter of 1944. Deep inside occupied Europe, where German command zones control rail hubs, fuel depots, and encrypted relay stations that feed the war machine, Allied maps are crowded with red lines and warning marks, each one representing cities, convoys, and entire divisions that could be wiped out if the next operation fails. Intelligence has gone dark, resistance networks have vanished, and enemy codes have changed without warning. If this mission collapses, thousands of lives will be lost before the Allies even know where the blow will land. That is why she was sent alone, unofficial, deniable, and expendable, carrying the only chance to uncover what the enemy is hiding. But as Command studies the maps and waits for her signal, no one realizes the real threat hasn't even appeared yet. Asterisk 3 minutes after midnight, everything goes wrong at once. Inside Allied Command, a decoded transmission flickers onto the screen. Letters stuttering, as if the machine itself hesitates to reveal what it sees. The coordinates don't align with any known target. The authentication markers are incomplete, and the timestamp is off by nearly an hour. At first, it looks like a mechanical error until radar operators notice a sharp, deliberate spike blooming across the scope, too clean to be interference, too precise to be chance. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Someone quietly says, "This wasn't supposed to happen," and in that moment, every assumption behind the mission begins to unravel. Outside the wire, the air seems to tighten. She pauses in the shadow of a supply shed, listening as engines idle where silence was expected. As boots move along a route no patrol was scheduled to take. Then her radio vibrates once, just enough to tell her a signal tried to get through before dying completely. Back at headquarters, analysts rush to cross-check the message, layering maps, time codes, and intercepted fragments over one another, but the pieces refuse to fit. One officer notices a single line embedded in the transmission, faint and almost deliberately obscured. And when it is pulled into the light, the room goes still. The message contains a reference only a handful of people should recognize. It mentions her. No one can explain how the enemy could know she was there. Possibilities race through the room-compromised resistance cells. A leak in Allied Command. Signal that should never have been transmitted, but each explanation raises more questions than it answers. On the ground, a flare suddenly screams into the sky, bathing the compound in blinding white light. She presses herself into the earth, heart hammering as shadows stretch and shrink around her. Guards begin moving with purpose now. Not routine, their voices sharper, faster, as if responding to an order that hasn't been heard yet. Inside the command room, a senior officer looks at the clock and then back at the map, where shifting markers now suggest converging forces instead of static defenses. "If this is real," he says quietly, "we're already late." Else realizes the coordinates from the strange transmission match nothing on their charts until they rotate the map and overlay a classified projection that was never meant to be used. The pattern clicks into place, and the implications are worse than anyone expected. This isn't just a patrol anomaly or a bad decode. It's a trap forming in real time, as boots close in around her position and radios crackle with clipped German commands. The room at headquarters falls into a heavy, terrified silence. Everyone understands the same thing at once. The mission is no longer about gathering intelligence, it's about survival. The next 90 seconds will decide whether she escapes with the truth, whether the enemy seals the perimeter, and whether anyone involved will live long enough to understand what has just been set in motion. Asterisk, the flare burns out. But but the damage is already done. Darkness returns in fragments, broken by moving flashlights and the low growl of engines starting where engines were never meant to start. She doesn't move. She can't. Mud presses cold against her ribs as boots pass so close she can hear leather creak and breath fog in the air. The pattern is wrong. Now, too tight, too deliberate. This is no longer routine security. Somewhere, someone has given an order that hasn't reached every ear yet. But its shape is already visible in the way the patrols converge. Overlapping paths that close gaps that were never supposed to close. Inside Allied command, voices overlap in sharp bursts. Analysts argue over timestamps, while a signals officer rewinds intercepted audio again and again, isolating syllables, pauses, breaths between words. A line officer points at the map and says the patrol density makes no sense unless the enemy knows exactly where to look. Another counters that the Germans have always been methodical, that this could still be coincidence. But the room doesn't believe that anymore. Not after the message. Not after her name surfaced where it never should have existed. Someone quietly disconnects a phone line and switches to a secure channel. No one likes using because it means the situation has crossed an invisible line. On the ground, she inches forward, feeling her way by memory alone. The compound smells different now. Fuel. Hot metal, something electrical. She reaches the shadow of a storage building just as a truck rolls past, its canvas sides snapping in the wind. The driver doesn't look down. The guard walking beside it does, and for half a second, their eyes are almost level. She doesn't blink. Neither does he. Then the moment breaks, and the guard keeps walking, unaware of how close the night came to ending right there. But this wasn't the real problem. Radio crackles somewhere inside the compound. Sharp and urgent, and suddenly the guards stop improvising. Movement snaps into alignment. Orders are being relayed now, clear, rehearsed. Search patterns change. Floodlights begin to warm up, their hum rising like a warning. She feels it in her chest before she sees it. The sense that the enemy has stopped reacting and started executing at headquarters. Young officer notices something small and horrifying. A patrol route on the map has shifted not randomly, but in response to something unseen. When he overlays the enemy movement with the last known estimates of her position, the lines intersect in a way that makes his mouth go dry. They're not sweeping, he says. They're funneling. No one answers him at first because everyone sees it now. The Germans aren't trying to find an intruder. They're trying to force one toward a specific point. On the ground, that point is becoming obvious. She hears dogs in the distance, not barking. Not yet. Just the low sound of handlers preparing them. She adjusts her route, abandoning the most direct path to the relay building in favor of a narrow corridor between two maintenance sheds. It's darker there, tighter. She knows the risk. Tight spaces trap you as easily as they hide you. But open ground now feels like a death sentence. Her radio vibrates again uselessly. No sound. No message. Just a reminder that command is trying and failing to reach her. She resists the urge to check it again. Light discipline. Movement discipline. Survival discipline. She presses forward, unaware that inside Allied headquarters, a senior intelligence officer is staring at a decoded fragment that makes his hands tremble. A call sign appears in the German traffic that should not exist on any enemy network. It belongs to a unit that officially does not operate in this sector, or on this front. Or, according to Allied files, at all something bigger is coming. The first searchlight snaps on without warning, cutting a hard white blade through the compound. It sweeps across rooftops, vehicles, fences. A second follows, then a third, overlapping in a deliberate grid. She flattens herself against the side of a building as the light passes inches above her head, illuminating the wall so brightly she can see her own shadow frozen there for a split second. A voice barks an order in German, sharp, confident. This is no panicked reaction force. This is trained response. Inside command, tension spikes into anger. Someone slams a fist onto the table and demands to know how the enemy could deploy this fast. Another officer answers with a word no one wants to hear, prepared. The implication hangs in the air. Prepared means anticipated. Prepared means someone expected this night. Prepared means this mission may not have been intercepted. It may have been invited. On the ground, a patrol changes direction abruptly, blocking her planned exit route. She pulls back, recalculates, and chooses a risk she had sworn she wouldn't take, crossing a lit service road. Timing becomes everything. She counts footsteps, measures engine noise, waits for a truck to pass, then sprints across the open ground in a heartbeat. Diving into cover, just as a guard turns and scans the road where she had been half a second earlier, her lungs burn, her hands shake. She forces them still, but this still isn't the real problem. At headquarters, a final piece slides into place. The strange coordinates from the earlier message align with a classified infrastructure overlay 1 that shows power routing, backup generators, and signal relays. Someone whispers what no one wants to say out loud. The enemy may not just be searching for her. They may be using her presence to trigger something larger. A test, a readiness drill, or worse, a live operation already in motion. On the ground, she reaches the outer wall of the relay building and finds the door locked, not unexpected. But the lock is newer than anticipated. Reinforced, recently installed. She works it quickly, too quickly, and the tension wire inside snaps with a sound that feels deafening in the quiet. She freezes, waits. Footsteps pause somewhere nearby. A voice murmurs a question. Another answers. The footsteps move on. Inside, the building hums with power. Equipment racks glow softly, cables snaking across the floor like veins. She moves with purpose now, because hesitation will kill her faster than speed. She opens a panel, photographs documents, copies frequency tables, pulls a thin packet of papers from a hidden compartment she was told might exist, but never confirmed. Her hands stop when she sees the heading stamped across the top. This isn't defensive planning. This is forward deployment. Outside, engines rev. Vehicles are moving again away from the perimeter, toward something else. She realizes with a cold certainty that the compound is no longer the center of attention. Whatever the Germans were preparing for is now beginning. Inside Allied command. The room goes silent as the same realization spreads. Enemy units are redeploying in real time, not to hunt her, but to respond to something she has already triggered simply by being here. The mission has crossed a line. Intelligence gathering has turned into interference. Presence has become consequence. She secures the documents, seals the satchel, and turns to leave just as the lights flicker. Once. Twice. Back up. Generators kick in with a roar that echoes through the building. Somewhere an alarm begins to wind up, not the compound-wide siren yet, but the warning tone that comes before it. She doesn't wait to hear the rest, as she slips back into the night. Dogs finally begin to bark. At headquarters, someone looks at the clock and speaks softly, as if volume itself might change the outcome. If she's still inside when the next phase starts, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. On the ground, she runs. And behind her, the compound shifts from search to lockdown, from confusion to execution, from reaction to intent, because now the enemy knows something is happening. Asterisk. The compound does not erupt into chaos all at once. It tightens first. Gates slam shut in sequence, metal echoing across concrete like a closing jaw. Floodlights lock into fixed positions. It's no longer searching, but sealing corridors of light that leave no shadow untouched for long. Sirens begin to howl, low and steady, not panicked, but procedural, the sound of a system executing a plan it has rehearsed. She feels the shift instantly. This is no longer about avoiding detection. This is about outrunning inevitability. She moves fast now, no longer counting steps, no longer waiting for perfect timing. The documents press against her side like a physical weight, every page inside them worth more than her life. A truck skids to a halt ahead of her, blocking the path she had memorized weeks ago. She pivots, cutting through a narrow maintenance lane just as a machine gun chatters somewhere behind her. Rounds snapping into the wall where she had been seconds earlier. Concrete explodes into dust. Alarms rise in pitch. Inside Allied command, The room fractures into controlled chaos. Orders are issued, rescinded, rewritten in real time as new signals flood in. Enemy units are mobilizing far beyond the compound columns, moving on roads that were supposed to be dormant. Rail activity spiking across an entire sector. Someone overlays her last known position with the new deployments and realizes the scale of what is happening. This isn't a localized response. It's a regional one. Whatever she uncovered has touched a nerve buried deep inside enemy planning. On the ground, she vaults a low wall and lands hard, pain flaring up her leg, sharp enough to steal her breath. She ignores it. There's no time to test injuries. Dogs are closer, now voices sharp, excited, pulling at their handlers. A spotlight snaps on, freezing her mid-stride. For half a second, everything stops. Then she throws herself into a drainage trench as bullets rake the ground above her, sparks ricocheting like fireflies. She crawls through stagnant water, choking back the urge to cough as the light sweeps past. Missing her by nothing more than luck and momentum. At headquarters, a message arrives from a listening post miles away. Enemy airfields are spinning up. Pilots are being briefed. Fuel depots are opening that have been sealed for months. A senior officer stares at the report and feels the shape of a disaster forming. They're not responding to her, he says. They're responding to what she saw. The implication is brutal. The enemy doesn't care if she escapes anymore, only that whatever she carries doesn't. On the ground, she reaches the outer fence and finds it reinforced, thicker than intelligence indicated. The cutters bite, strain, then stall. Her hands slip. The sirens swell. She abandons the tool and climbs, fingers burning as they grip cold metal. Halfway over, a flare ignites behind her, turning her into a silhouette against the wire. Shouts erupt. A shot cracks past her head. She drops hard on the far side, rolling as rounds chew into the dirt where she lands. Inside Allied command. A countdown appears on a board time until the enemy's next operational phase reaches irreversible momentum. It's not an official clock, just a projection, but everyone watches it anyway. Someone mutters that, even if she gets out now, it might already be too late. Another officer snaps back that speculation won't save lives. The argument dies when a new intercept comes in, fragmented and urgent, referencing movements that match the document she just stole. Confirmation hits like a blow. What she carries is real and catastrophic. She runs through the forest, branches whipping her face, lungs screaming. The extraction point is close now, but the sound of engines follows her, growing louder. A vehicle crashes through undergrowth to her left, headlights slicing between trees. She veers downhill, sliding, barely staying upright, and crashes into a shallow ravine, just as the vehicle overshoots her position. She doesn't stop. She can't. At headquarters, an operator finally gets a weak signal lock. Her call sign flickers on a screen, then vanishes. A voice breaks through, breathless, distorted. Just enough to confirm she's alive. Just enough to transmit a single word before the signal collapses again. The room goes silent as the word is written on the board. It confirms their worst fear and their last hope at the same time. On the ground, she reaches the rendezvous and finds it compromised. Fresh tracks, broken branches. Someone has been there recently and not on her side. She hesitates for the first time, the weight of decision pressing down harder than the documents. Wait and risk ambush, or move and risk missing extraction entirely. She chooses movement. She always does. A helicopter roars into view through the trees, low and fast, its approach reckless by any sane standard. Tracer fire reaches for it from the compound behind her. She sprints, waving once, twice, then dives as the aircraft dips. A crewman leaning out, arm extended. She grabs, fingers locking, and is hauled upward as bullets punch holes through the fuselage. The helicopter lurches, climbs, and tears away into the night. Inside Allied command, no one cheers. They watch the feeds, the maps, the intercepts, and they understand something fundamental has shifted. Enemy units continue to move even as she escapes. Plans are being executed that were never meant to be revealed. Whatever advantage the Allies gain from her survival will come at a cost measured in blood. As the helicopter disappears into the dark, clutching its cargo of truth, one final intercept crackles through the speakers, an enemy transmission so calm, so controlled, it chills the room. It references contingency measures, secondary timelines, adjusted objectives. The helicopter lands without ceremony, its rotors still spinning as she is pulled free and rushed across the tarmac under blackout lights. No one speaks to her at first. Medics check her hands, her leg, her face, but their movements are automatic. It's almost distant, as if everyone understands that whatever she carries matters more than the state of her body. Inside headquarters, officers gather in silence as the satchel is placed on the table. Mud-stained, bullet-scarred, ordinary. In every way except for what it contains. When the documents are laid out, the room changes. Not with noise, not with shock, but with a kind of quiet gravity that settles into the bones. Fuel allocations that explain months of unexplained shortages, rail schedules that reveal why entire divisions were nearly overrun. Deployment orders dated weeks in the future, already being executed tonight. One officer removes his glasses and rubs his eyes. Another reads the same page 3 times, as if repetition might make it less real. What she brought back doesn't just clarify the war, it rewrites it. Her debrief lasts hours. She speaks calmly, methodically, recounting movements, voices, timings. She mentions the reinforced locks, the altered patrols, the moment she realized the enemy wasn't hunting her, but using her presence as a signal. A stenographer's hands slow when she describes the heading on the document she wasn't supposed to find. That heading is circled later in red ink and stamped with a classification level that didn't exist before that night. Outside the briefing room, decisions ripple outward. Operations are delayed, rerouted, quietly canceled. Entire plans vanish from whiteboards overnight. Units already in motion are redirected without explanation. Lives are saved that will never know how close they came to being lost. Others are not. The war does not pause for revelation. It only adjusts in the days that follow. Official reports describe a minor intelligence success, a routine infiltration. Useful material recovered. Her name appears briefly, then disappears entirely from the record. She is reassigned, reclassified, reduced to a reference number in a locked file. Letters written by men who survived because of those documents speak of confusion, of battles that never happened, of orders that changed at the last moment without reason. None of them know why. Years later, historians will argue over that period. Some will point to sudden shifts in enemy movement. Others will note an inexplicable hesitation in an offensive that should have crushed advancing forces. Footnotes will mention intelligence, irregularities. No one will mention her, but the truth remains. Buried in archives sealed so tightly that even now, entire pages remain blacked out. A surveillance log shows a gap, 7 minutes where no cameras recorded anything inside the compound. An eyewitness account contradicts every official timeline, describing activity that should have been impossible given the state of the perimeter. A final memo, dated months after the war's end, questions whether the enemy's contingency plan was fully neutralized or merely interrupted. What she saw that night suggested something worse than defeat. It suggested preparation beyond the war everyone thought they were fighting. A second layer of planning that assumed loss, survival, and continuation. That memo was marked unresolved and locked away. She never spoke publicly about the mission. Those who knew her later said she slept lightly, as if listening for something that never came. When asked once, years afterward, whether the mission was worth it, she only said that some victories are measured not by what happens but by what doesn't, and the truth about what she uncovered inside enemy territory is still locked in the archives.